What up, dude bros? I'm Frank. This is a video review of the Nerf Zombie Strike WrathBolt. This blaster in the Zombie Strike series is a band-powered crossbow that shoots the Nerf bolts, or arrows, whatever. It's like a one-handed crossbow. You could also consider it the little brother to the WrathBolt. Let's get into the review. Starting with the external overview to the WrathBolt, starting up at the front. These large plastic things are the crossbow's arms, pretty much, but they don't flex or anything. It is rigid plastic. It's powered by the band right here. There's no internal spring or other powering mechanism, so don't cut that string that is actually powering this blaster. So to prime this one, you just put your fingers around the band like this and pull back. It does seem a little DIY, like there isn't a priming handle or anything. It seems kind of more rugged. And while it's a little weird at first, you can quickly get used to pulling that back pretty fast. Well, fast for a crossbow. The rate of fire is by no means quick. So after you prime that string back, that's when you load in your arrow, or bolts. I don't know what Hasbro officially calls these. This is more of a crossbow, but there are Rebel blasters that are bows that fire the same ammo, just with different colors. So bolts, arrows, kind of the same thing for Nerf. But to confirm, the arrows are compatible with the WrathBolt. It's just one type of arrow that goes into both of these blasters and most of the Rebel arrow blasters. To load, you just put in the arrow or bolt, just slide it on in there. The blaster does have to be primed before you put in the arrow. It won't let you put in the arrow to actually prime back the string. Interestingly, there's actually a lock preventing you from putting in an arrow if the band is not pulled back. And I think that's because the shafts here are just pretty weak. So if you tried to prime it using that shaft, you'll snap the arrow. And that would be kind of a bummer if you didn't know any better. So you have to prime that back, and that disables the lock, which allows you to slide it on in there. And since sliding arrows in is kind of weird, you kind of think, how far is too far? Do I put in just the tip or the whole thing? And you have to put in the whole thing, bro. But you do have to slide it all the way in. But when you put it in all the way, there's a knocking indicator in the back here, which turns orange to let you know you've knocked it, you've put it in far enough, so you should stop pushing. So after that turns orange, you're knocked and ready to go. That's not a priming indicator, that is a knocking indicator. It doesn't turn orange when you prime it back, only when you put in the arrow. So you're primed, you're knocked, you have the arrow, you're ready to go. So then you pull the trigger and it goes pew. The launch itself is very quiet. It's not like a spring power or definitely not a flywheel blaster. It's pretty silent. However, the included arrows and all of the Nerf arrows whistle, so it kind of makes it loud. But as far as stealthy blasters go, like the launch point, you can't hear the pop of a spring blaster or the from a flywheel blaster. And getting shot with a whistling arrow when you don't hear the pop, it's pretty intimidating. But if you'll notice up top, there is no in-strike tactical rail for your optic, so good luck aiming. That's a joke, mostly. Back to the overview, to the grip. It's a smaller grip, but it's not terribly uncomfortable, which kind of surprises me. I am definitely the first to just whine about grips when they're too small or uncomfortable. This is a small one that isn't terrible for an adult hand. If you have a super fat hand with fat fingers, you might be sliding off the end there, but I don't know. I don't have fat hands. So pretty comfortable grip. And then at the bottom there, you have a lanyard mount. The styling of the blaster is in line with the Zombie Strike series. You know, you have the saw blade right here with the little wing nut for the tension for the saw. It doesn't actually work, of course. It's just supposed to look like you built it in a garage or whatever. Those of you who dig the Zombie Strike line for its appearance, this is definitely in line with that series for the cosmetics and all of that. So that's the blaster overview. Again, to fire, you pull back on the string, you shove in, not just the tip, the whole thing, then you press the trigger, and you pew pew. Or you pew, reload, and then pew. It doesn't go pew pew, it's a super slow blaster. Firing demo right here. Test firing at my blaster board's dart net. So firing the WrathBolt is pretty fun if you're trying to fire something like it, like a crossbow band powered. I don't believe these blasters are particularly war effective. It's pretty cool to fire because it's so quiet. You don't hear the pop of a spring blaster or the rev of a flywheel blaster, so it's super quiet, and then to hear the whistle of the arrow, it's pretty intimidating, and I think it's pretty neat. But that super slow rate of fire makes it less practical than pretty much all of the other Nerf blasters on the market. But I did not have any jams or malfunctions. It's a pretty straightforward blaster, so I would be pretty surprised if I did have any jams, but I didn't. And I put the WrathBolt up on my chronograph, and I got an average of 64 feet per second. And that compares to, I think, only the DreadBolt. One second. Arrow launchers, DreadBolt, WrathBolt. This is my chrono book, BT dubs. Every time I measure a blaster, I throw it in my chrono book. It's even labeled chrono book. Isn't that cool? You're jealous, aren't you? Yeah, so 64 FPS. That only compares to the DreadBolt's 55 FPS. So it shoots better than the DreadBolt, but I don't have any other data to compare it to. But it's the best arrow launcher I've measured. Yeah, for what that's worth. So that's the firing analysis on the WrathBolt, I guess, more or less. Now to my personal opinion on the WrathBolt. Overall, I like the blaster. I think it does a good job at what it tries to do. What it tries to do is not something I would take into a Nerf war, but plinking around with it in my house was actually pretty fun. Now the DreadBolt was pretty fun just because it was overbuilt and just way too big to be even close to practical, but it was fun knowing it was excessive and like it's super big and just awkward to use. But if you're all about the bands and stuff, you know, it's a fun blaster to use. I don't think either of these are particularly useful in a Nerf battle, but the WrathBolt is far more practical than the DreadBolt. The performance is actually better. The rate of fire is probably a little slower because it doesn't have this handle, but it's not a huge wicked big primary. You could totally just keep this in your backpack or something and whip it out just to intimidate somebody or just as a joke. It is intimidating to hear that whistle of an arrow and not hear the launch, or you know, when somebody fires it. It just starts whistling and it's like, where did it come from? I have no idea. Especially in a night war, if you just start launching these into the air and your opponents are just like, what the F? Who's shooting at us? So if you saw the DreadBolt and you're like, that's really cool, I want an arrow launcher, but it's too big and impractical, this is more practical. Is it practical as a primary? Not for how I approach the Nerf hobby, but maybe for you. I didn't have any jams or malfunctions. It does what it's supposed to do, so overall, a positive opinion, which really surprises me because these arrow launchers are typically so gimmicky that I just kind of think they're a waste of space. But it's as small as an arrow launcher can reasonably get, at least like a mainstream one, because you could totally just snap these off and attach them to the front here and then get rid of the bow arms. Then could make this thing actually like holsterable, which would be pretty cool. But that wouldn't sell because it's not a proper crossbow without like arms or whatever. Now that I think about it, I kind of want to do that. That'd be funny. Negative points that I do want to point out, I would have liked to see an Instrike Tactical rail up on the top. The DreadBolt had one. I don't get why they didn't put one right here, just because Tactical rails are awesome, and to have a scope on like a sniper crossbow thing, that would just be hilarious. And there's no place to store arrows, and I think they have these big stupid arms that don't really do anything, which is prime real estate for, you know, like arrow holding spots. You could have them underneath, pointing forward, up top, or maybe diagonal atop. I don't know, but that would have been nice to see. Or, you know, extra Tactical rails, just because you can. You have all this plastic. When I see blank plastic, I just want to attach rails to it. If there's not something else there, like, come on. I feel like that scene in Saturday, like, I need more cowbell, and I need more tack rails, bro. I just always need more. No matter how many you attach to a blaster, there can be more. We need rails upon rails, like lateral splits with more rails. Oh man, yeah, I have an addiction to tactics. Back on topic, my opinion is overall pretty positive for what it is. I do think it's gimmicky. I don't think it's particularly war practical, but I think it would be hilarious to have one guy in like a group or a clan of like 10 to have one of these launching arrows into the abyss just for the lels, but hopefully my review objectively covered everything so you can make that purchase decision for yourself. If you'd like to buy a Zombie Strike WrathBolt, I'll put a purchase link in the description box below. That concludes this video review. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, bros, stay tactical.